Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I, for one, cannot thank you enough for this reporting, because as someone who worked in the Senate Finance Committee where we would write these tax laws, we knew we were sending them over to another world that we couldn't control, which is that rules and regulations world, and it seems more out of control than ever.
Right. I mean, what we had here in 2017 was we had a very significant tax cuts package that came out of Congress and signed into law by President Trump. But the law was written incredibly quickly and incredibly poorly. And so from there, it has to go to the Treasury to write a series of regulations to help administer the new law. And what happened as part of this law is it was a combination of more than $5 trillion in tax cuts and $4 trillion in new taxes. And the most significant new taxes on companies was about $250 billion on multinationals that were supposed to help dissuade them from pushing profits into tax havens overseas. And what happened is, as soon as that bill was signed into law, several dozen of these companies realized that this was not something they were eager to do. A lot of them were not expecting it, in part because the law was done so quickly. There were no hearings on this. It all took place over 7 weeks. And so what we've basically had over the last 2 years is Treasury kind of pretty much, I wouldn't say under cover of darkness, but in a process that the public really has very little visibility into, has written a series of very significant regulations that have had the effect of basically rolling back the $250 billion in new taxes on multinationals to the tune of tens of billions and possibly hundreds of billions of dollars in tax reductions, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, and this regulation process is, I guess, what we could call a semi-public process, in the sense that there are public notifications that this process is underway. We're writing the regulation for X law. You are theoretically invited to comment on this, but it's only people with high-priced lobbyists who even know that that's happening and know how to comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a couple stages in this process. For the first year, there isn't really even anything in the public. In other words, for the first year of the regulatory process, this is basically all private communications going on between lobbyists and staffers at the Treasury Department and officials there. And there's really no public disclosure of any of that, of who's having the meetings and what they're seeking. And then a kind of year into the process, the Treasury Department issues a series of proposed regulations. And at that point, it becomes public. And then there are dozens, if not hundreds of comment letters that become public about this. But, you know, those are things that are really understood. I mean, if you look at some of the letters, I mean, they're literally, you know, written almost in Esperanto. I mean, these are things only understood by literally a few hundred tax attorneys in America. And so now we've got is after a very, very complicated 2-year process, we are now seeing how these new taxes are shaking out. And part of the issue here is that because the law was so poorly written, Treasury Department had an incredible amount of latitude or decided that it should exercise a lot of latitude to try to make a law that didn't make a lot of sense in places make some sense. And in doing so, they're really only hearing from one side. You know, there's no one out there lobbying the Treasury Department to make the taxes more stringent. 99.99% of their meetings are with representatives for companies that are seeking the taxes to be cut.
And they all, each company makes the case that, oh, you don't understand how my company works. Yes, that might be okay for some other kind of company, but this particular company, if you tax us this way, it will crush us this way. And each are making that argument all the time.
Or that the intention of Congress was not to tax these types of transactions. These types of transactions aren't meant to avoid or dodge taxes. These are transactions we have to do in the course of our regular business. They have nothing to do with dodging taxes. And there may be some legitimacy to those arguments that maybe they're unfair, maybe they were poorly conceived, but it isn't necessarily in the authority of the Treasury Department to decide that Congress has written a law that maybe is unfair or maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. And in the case of some of the things we wrote about, for instance, an exemption that Secretary Mnuchin signed off on that essentially exempted giant foreign banks like Credit Suisse and Barclays from one of the major new taxes, there isn't really, there's a lot of discussion about whether Treasury had the authority to do that. And staffers at Treasury did raise these objections to the officials at Treasury that were in charge of this, and ultimately they did not win the day.
The bottom line, as it were, is that as much as we thought the Trump tax cuts cost the Treasury, it cost much more.
Right.
The deficit is much higher, and now CBO is projecting new numbers for where the deficit is going, and the deficit and the debt are going way up higher than they projected, even when they saw what the Congress intended the tax cuts to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two things to say about that. For one thing, the deficit doesn't have to go higher. The alternative is the government can just cut spending. They can continue to cut spending at the EPA and at OSHA and the Department of Education and NASA and take your pick. They can cut spending, and then you don't have to worry about the deficit getting higher. The other issue here is that, remember, the reason the Republicans were able to get the law passed so quickly is they did it through this process called reconciliation, which basically they promise that the deficit is only going to be above a certain amount, and then they're going to ram the law through, and the Democrats don't have the ability to filibuster or stop the bill from becoming law. But what has happened is that number, the number they essentially promised, is really no longer a real number, because the Treasury, through the regulatory process, has effectively added hundreds of billions of dollars potentially to that deficit.
It is Thursday, the 2nd of January of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Yes, I know the grit isn't necessarily endemic to New Orleans, but grits are there. I've had them. So there. All right. Do not diss the grits. Please don't. Well, it is the 2nd of January. We got through the first. The Rose Bowl was played, and for some reason it's not the most important bowl game in the bowl schedule. How did that happen? Well, everybody wanted a national championship, and apparently the Rose Bowl wasn't it. But it was an exciting game yesterday, nonetheless. Very beautiful down there in Southern California. Pasadena, the Rose Bowl set up with the San Gabriel Mountains as a backdrop. A very beautiful venue. If you've never been there, it's quite lovely. Well, looks like we have some bad news this morning. Julian Castro has dropped out of the race, and Tulsi Gabbard has not. That says something right there, okay? Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people saying that the Democrats are trying to steal the nomination from Tulsi and maybe even Bernie. Well, if you aren't a Democrat, you have some ramifications in that, right? Oh, I know Tulsi is actually registered as a Democrat, but is she really a Democratic representative? Is she? I sometimes wonder about it. Nonetheless, she's still in the running, and no one listened to one thing that Julian Castro had to say. I wonder why that is. The Trump team early on, along with Vlad, had picked Biden as the Democratic nominee so they could, well, obviously, array all their forces and resources against him instead of diluting it by going after many. So identify Biden as the nominee and attack him and suck the air out of everybody else in the room. It is a strategy when right-wing trolls, and this is funny because a lot of them are dupes, I understand. But it was quite amazing to me how immediately they were all on the same page, almost as if they had marching orders. This floating of Biden as being the nominee and how corrupt he is and his son. When that started getting floated, I thought, you're funny. Biden's not going to be the nominee. I mean, first of all, it's too early. Second of all, I don't think it's going to be Biden. But apparently, if you just put all of the media coverage on the Biden scandal, by default, he will be the Democratic nominee. Is Biden the best nominee for the Democratic side? I think no. But I guess we'll have to vote for him. I won't have to hold my nose necessarily, but still, I would have liked Kamala. But there was something about Kamala they didn't like either. Oh, she was a cop. Well, Klobuchar's a cop too. No, it says about Amy Klobuchar, oh, she's just a cop. As if being a prosecutor on our side is a bad thing. Unbelievable. Well, as quickly as those Russian trolls, who are actually real people that I have been engaging with, as quickly as they had identified Biden, and quite a while ago, and I just laughed at it. Just like it was stupid. But repetition will get results. And it's looking almost like a foregone conclusion that Biden will be the nominee. And of course, the DNC will be blamed for it. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Oh, there is so much news out there, of course. You know there is. Oh, what about Trump's Benghazi over there in Iraq? I love how they're blaming the Iranians. And we're going to bomb Iran for Iraqi protesters storming the U.S. embassy because of Iranian influence in their country. They're protesting Iranian influence, and we're going to bomb the Iranians for the Iraqi protesters protesting at our embassy. Well, actually, it looks like the protesters have hightailed it out of there, since there are troops on their way if they haven't landed already. And but that hasn't stopped the saber rattling that we want to bomb Iran for protests against Iran in Iraq. Wow. Sounds like 9/11 all over again, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. They're going to wag the dog any way they can. They're in deep doo-doo. Since we have the wag the dog meme going on here, might as well carry it on, huh? Let's keep this metaphor going. Yes, they are in deep doo-doo because of the impeachment, and Rudy Giuliani can't shut up. Thankfully, he cannot shut up. He wants to testify and be a lawyer in the impeachment trial. He wants to be able to be a lawyer. I guess he'd be defending Trump. Now, you can have some personal lawyers in the impeachment trial, but the interrogators, the prosecutors, are all the senators. All right, well, he's a suspect, and I guess he gets to be a lawyer too. Nancy Pelosi has Mitch McConnell over a barrel. We are hoping that she uses that leverage. I actually believe she's using it right now. More evidence comes out as the articles of impeachment are held back until Mitch McConnell assures, well, the United States of America and all of we voters, that he's going to give a fair trial. And what's up with John Roberts? What role will he actually be playing as he presides over the trial? Will he be an activist judge, or will he be a lump on a log? Usually in those impeachment trials, the Chief Justice is a lump on a log. You know, pushes on parliamentary questions, but that's about the extent of it. Doesn't have an active role in directing the trial as it goes. Roberts could do that, though. He did send a volley across the bow, so to speak, with his essay about, America needs to learn more civics. Well, you know, it was your side that took civics out of the classroom, so spare me, please. And civility, since it was your side that made just the mere term liberal a pejorative, I don't want to hear about your trolling and purity trolling on decorum. Civility. There's one side that are a bunch of loudmouths, and they carry guns openly to tell everybody what polite conversation will be. And you're telling us to be civil? Please, John Roberts, please. Is that the kind of umpire you are? You've shown us what kind of umpire you really are. It's not just balls and strikes. No, you're going to say the foul pole is actually about 20 feet over there to the right. You didn't know, did you? Yeah, we know now. Yes, we do. Well, as I mentioned, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, an investigative report by the New York Times revealed exactly what happened after the 2017 tax cuts were signed into law and the corporate lobbying blitz began. And it's still going on now. On the rest of the menu, a white nationalist who ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida was arrested for kidnapping and weapons charges. Oh, he's such a proud boy. And all the proud boys are proud of him. Tens of thousands gathered under tight security at a sports stadium in New Jersey to read the entire Talmud. And as more women run for office, child care remains a hurdle. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where a 20-year-old man is charged with damaging a Picasso painting at the Tate Modern Gallery in London. And the military moved in to help mass-scale evacuations from Australian bushfires. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. And, I should mention, Kelly will be making a major move from New York City, and I think she's going to go to a destination in the southern part of the United States. We'll fill you in as we get closer to that. So let's wish Kelly good luck on that new adventure and move to warmer climes and hopefully a little bit more affordability, too. Let's hope. And thank you, Kelly, for doing all that you do here. If you would then take a look to the leftish of the page, well, the bottom of our home page at netrootsradio.com, and to the leftish of the chat room link, you will then find the link to our Patreon page. And I know it's a broken record to those of you who have heard this so many times before, but do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your recurring patronage of Netroots Radio helps us resist as the founders originally intended. And our civic duty is very important to us. And so important that we will fund this out of our own pockets, but we are still unable to do it without your generosity. And it is your generosity that has allowed us to continue resisting 24/7, 365 for going on 9 years. Yeah, we're the little powerhouse that could, and we still are. And thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom, of course, takes care of that, and he does a lot more too than really we all know, but we do. At least we do here, and we like to acknowledge that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and then get that out there on social media. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Yes, indeed. All right, let's get into this first offering here. It's not very long, but I thought it was, it has a certain dark humor to it. It's almost under the aegis of the I told you so phrase that I am in the process of trademarking, so don't use it unless you are willing to pay me a royalty. I'm only kidding. I'm not going to do any cease and desist on I told you so, but it should be trademarked. And this offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press. A white nationalist who ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida and was a featured speaker during the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville was arrested on charges of kidnapping, domestic violence, and possession of a firearm during a crime of violence. Augustus Sol Invictus, age 36, was arrested on Monday at a Florida mall by Brevard County Sheriff's deputies on a warrant issued out of South Carolina. Jail records described him as an out-of-state fugitive. Oh, he crossed state lines to commit or to avoid being charged with crimes. Either way, it's not good for this fella. Invictus, an Orlando area attorney, has called for violent uprisings during his 2016 Senate bid to unseat Marco Rubio. He got widespread attention for claiming that he killed a goat and drank its blood as part of a pagan ritual. He failed, however, to win the nomination from Florida's Libertarian Party to challenge Rubio. White nationalist Richard Spencer, who organized the deadly Charlottesville rally that refocused attention on the country's frayed race relations, had credited Invictus with drafting the core tenets behind the rally. Oh, did that include running over women and killing them? Did that? Jail records show that Invictus is being held without bond and is to appear before a judge on January 15th. Invictus was taken into custody on Monday afternoon by deputies from the Brevard County Sheriff's Fugitive Unit. Invictus had been under surveillance since Christmas Day when South Carolina authorities notified officials in Florida that Invictus may be in the area. Florida officials began tailing Invictus after tracking him down at a relative's home, and he was taken into custody without incident after leaving a gym. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, is brought to us by Evermore, anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press. Tens of thousands of Jewish people congregated yesterday, Wednesday, at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey to celebrate the reading of the entire Talmud in an event called Siyam Hashas, and drew a heavy security presence after recent anti-Semitic attacks in the area. The New Year's Day event celebrated the completion of the reading of the 2,711-page Babylonian Talmud, a process that takes 7.5 years. Similar events have recently been held in major cities around the globe, such as Mexico City, while others are scheduled in the next few weeks. The Talmud contains discussions of Jewish law that guide every aspect of life. Rabbi Yosef C. Golding, an organizer, said that he worked with more than 50 law enforcement agencies on security for the event and that more than 300 uniformed state police were to be in the stadium. The event was broadcast internationally, and New Jersey State Police said there were no reports of security issues or problems related to the event as of late Wednesday afternoon. Organizers estimated that 88,000 people attended the event. The last event at the stadium in 2012 drew about 90,000, organizers said, and the event is held every 7.5 years. The New York City region has been rocked by recent attacks on Jews. On December 10th, 2 shooters targeted a kosher market in Jersey City, New Jersey, killing 3 people. And last weekend, a man stabbed 5 people at the home of a rabbi in Monsey, New York. There have also been several street assaults in New York City in recent weeks. I live in Pittsburgh, and of course, just over a year ago, we had the massacre in Pittsburgh. We see what is happening here, all of the anti-Semitic attacks last week and on the streets in New York, said Rabbi Daniel Wasserman of the Shar Torah congregation. Whatever the reasons are, I'll leave that to the political scientists. But the reality is that whether it's ourselves or any ethnic group, we are here. We're proud. We're not going anywhere. And this is the perfect example of it. Whitehurst and Christina A. Cassidy of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. When Kimberly Dudick ran for her 4th term in the Montana House, state officials told her she could not use campaign money to pay for child care for her 4 young children. She is now running for Attorney General and is trying to visit a big chunk of the sprawling state, spending hours on the road. That means she needs even more help picking up her kids at school and daycare when she's away, and her husband has a late night at the office. It just seems behind the times, Dudick, whose family is living off her husband's income and savings from her work as a lawyer. When it was a man campaigning, the woman was traditionally the one to stay home and take care of the kids. There is not someone home just taking care of the kids. Experts predict a large number of women will again run for office in 2020 like they did in 2018, and child care remains a hurdle for many of them. A congressional candidate in New York successfully petitioned the Federal Election Commission in 2018 to allow campaign money to help cover child care costs, but it applies only to those running for federal office. That leaves women in many states who are running for the legislature, statewide positions like Attorney General or local offices, to find another way to pay for child care as they campaign, which often requires night and weekend work. Only 6 states have laws specifically allowing campaign money to be used for child care. 5 states are considering it. In most states, including Montana, the law is silent on the issue and up to interpretation by agencies or boards. Agencies in at least 9 states have allowed child care to be a campaign-related expense, but those decisions are not law and could be reversed. Utah is among the states that passed a gender-neutral child care expense law, which went into effect last May. Sponsored by Republican State Representative Craig Hall, it easily passed the GOP-dominated legislature. Luz Escamilla was one of the first candidates to use it as she campaigned to become the first Latina mayor of Salt Lake City. Escamilla had to take time off from her full-time banking job to knock on doors and shake hands as she made her case to voters. Without a paycheck, it was hard to cover the cost of child care for her two youngest daughters. After the law was passed, she used about $1,500 in campaign cash over 2 months to help pay for it. The extra time she could spend campaigning helped propel her to a spot in the general election, though she lost in November. Full-time campaigning during the summer with toddlers, it makes it really difficult, Escamilla said, adding of the law, it was a great tool in our toolbox. Lawmakers in Minnesota added child care as an allowable expense in 2018, while Colorado, New York, New Hampshire, and California passed laws in 2019. Before Colorado allowed campaign cash to be used for child care, Amber McReynolds, a former chief elections official in Denver, was contemplating a bid for statewide office in 2017. The costs of child care were a considerable concern as a single mother of two young children. For that and other reasons, McReynolds decided against running. When you look at the statistics in terms of representatives in Congress or statewide office, and you don't see single moms in that category, that's why, McReynolds, who's a CEO of a nonprofit, said, the circumstances are just that much more difficult when you are in politics. The policy also can help fathers running for office in families where both parents work. Jean Shinsdek, Associate Director of the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers, said the record number of women who ran for office in 2018 has helped drive the issue. Still, lawmakers in a number of states have resisted the change. In Tennessee, the sponsor of a measure to add child care to the list of approved campaign expenses faced a skeptical audience during a subcommittee hearing last spring. If they aren't running for office because they can't find child care, how are they going to do the job down here? Asked State Representative John Crawford, a Republican from Kingsport, Tennessee. Well, how about getting some child care down there, wherever you are? Well, I guess I can't figure that one out. The sponsor, Democratic State Representative Jason Powell, said he introduced the proposal after people he tried to recruit to run for city council in Nashville declined because child care needs kept them from campaigning. Well, we better get on with our break. And you do know that when we get back from our break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Fox Meet Henhouse. One of the characters in Jay Roach's new movie Bombshell describes Fox News as a, quote, nostalgia machine for a lost America. That machine has always had near its heart, along with racism and corporatism, sexism. In the America for which certain people pine, the abuse it documents is not a problem. There's nothing to see here. But for the rest of us, Me Too is here, even overdue, and in Bombshell, worlds collide as the culture of abuse, led by the late Fox News chief Roger Ailes, runs into trouble with three women at the network. One is the established anchor Gretchen Carlson, who's aging out of Ailes' fantasies. Another is Megyn Kelly, his current fave. And the third, a composite character, Kayla, who represents a future prospect. It's a symmetrical way to tell the story, and the three actors who portray the women, Nicole Kidman, Charlize Theron, and Margot Robbie, respectively, are perfect, and indeed make the movie. Extra kudos are probably due Theron for a total character capture, an even tougher job when portraying a known figure contemporaneously. If you follow the story or perhaps watch the Showtime miniseries The Loudest Voice, there's not much new here. The miniseries actually gives more background and perspective. Both, however, let the heroes off the hook too easily. That Fox News world I mentioned a minute ago, well, that's the world where Carlson and Kelly built their careers and stature. Yet there seems to be little dot connecting between the overarching Fox message and what happened to them, let alone soul-searching, even as Ailes gets what he deserves. Bombshell tells its story with humor and panache, but the comeuppance is too concentrated. Sadly, the real outcome is that the poison of Fox News rolls on. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
It's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
What does the Constitution say should happen, must happen, after the House of Representatives impeaches a president? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Article 1 of the Constitution, which sets forth the powers of the Congress, says the Senate shall have the sole power to try impeachments, and, when sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. The oath that each senator must take in the impeachment trial of a president comes from the Senate's rules on impeachment and says this: I solemnly swear or affirm, in all things appertaining to the trial of, insert name, now pending, I will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and the laws, so help me God. To do impartial justice, that's the requirement for each senator sitting as a trial juror, which means that each senator has the obligation to evaluate the evidence impartially and objectively and not politically, and to decide whether the president has committed a high crime or misdemeanor. High crime or misdemeanor being a term of art that means, in Hamilton's words, an abuse or violation of the public trust. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day that a morning explosion at the Sago mine in West Virginia claimed the lives of 12 miners. The Federal Mine Safety and Health Administration had cited the mine more than 200 times the year before the disaster. 29 miners were in the section of the mine where the explosion occurred. One miner died instantly from the blast. 12 more were trapped with the lethal gases that had built up in the mine. Rescue efforts began to try and reach the miners. Then, an incorrect report came that the trapped miners were alive, 2 miles inside the mine. On the surface, church bells rang and rescue crews scrambled to set up medical stations. News outlets reported on the miracle in West Virginia, but the reports were not accurate. Only one of the trapped miners was found alive. Randall McCloy was rescued at 1:30 in the morning on January 4th. Despite the record of safety violations, the mining company, the International Coal Group, tried to claim that the explosion was caused by a lightning strike. The United Mine Workers of America Union rejected that excuse. The union issued a report on their findings after the disaster. Their report was critical of both the mine operators and the federal safety oversight of the mine. It included the statement, "The fact is that the tragedy that morning was preventable and should never have occurred." The company reopened the mine just a few months later, although the cause of the explosion remained undetermined. Due to pressure, it later decided to close the mine. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Most folks thought that up was down. We all lived and gave our soul. Did it all smoking coal.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Welcome back to a brand new year of What's News. We've been off for a week, using that time to switch out computers and rebuild my studio. It's still, unfortunately, a work in progress. And Progressive Voices was hit with a crypto virus that took the stream down for most of the past week and continues to plague us. That, too, is still a work in progress. But we made it out of the teens to 2020.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020. 2020.
The Senate's impeachment trial plans are still up in the air. It's 32 days until the Iowa caucuses, 33 days until Trump's State of the Union address, and 40 days until the New Hampshire primary. We're off and running. U.S. troops fired tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters who descended on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad for a second time on Wednesday. The protests by hundreds of supporters of an Iranian-backed militia began Tuesday when they broke through a gate and set fire to a reception area as U.S. diplomats were barricaded inside the embassy. The militia fighters finally retreated across the Tigris River on Wednesday after days of clashes with U.S. and Iraqi security forces guarding the embassy and personnel in Baghdad. The conflict began after American airstrikes on Sunday killed 25 fighters from this Iran-backed militia in Iraq. The Trump administration said those U.S. strikes were in retaliation for last week's killing of an American contractor and the wounding of American and Iraqi troops in a rocket attack on an Iraqi military base that the U.S. blamed on the militia. The U.S. strikes also angered the Iraqi government, which called them an unjustified violation of its sovereignty. Trump on Tuesday threatened a, quote, big price for this week's violence, which he blamed on Iran, tweeting that, quote, Iran will be held fully responsible for lives lost or damage incurred at any of our facilities. He ordered about 750 U.S. soldiers to be deployed to the Middle East, as about 3,000 more prepared for possible deployment within days. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was scheduled to visit Ukraine on Wednesday, along with 4 other countries this week, but he postponed his travel to stay in Washington to monitor the situation in Iraq. Donald Trump, well, is not scheduled to return to Washington from Mar-a-Lago until Sunday. But that's not the only global trouble facing us. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said Wednesday that his country would continue building its nuclear arsenal and soon unveil a new strategic weapon. Kim's comments came after his deadline passed for the United States to begin new talks on exchanging denuclearization progress and sanctions relief. He had warned he might take a new path if the U.S. ignored his ultimatum, raising concerns that North Korea would soon test an intercontinental missile and a nuclear warhead. Trump insists that their relationship is perfect. But the president's former national security advisor, John Bolton, tweeted on Wednesday that the U.S. should resume military exercises with South Korea and hold hearings to determine U.S. troop readiness on the Korean peninsula in the wake of Kim's assertion that he can violate a ban on testing nuclear weapons. And so it goes. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts issued his annual year-end report in which he touted the independence of the judiciary and the role of U.S. judges in promoting civic education. Wonder who he's talking to with this quote. In our age, when social media can instantly spread rumor and false information on a grand scale, the public's need to understand our government and the protections it provides is ever more vital, he wrote. Roberts will serve this year as the presiding judge at Trump's Senate impeachment trial. Well, the presidential campaigns are rolling out their 2019 fourth quarter fundraising numbers, and once again, Bernie Sanders blows them all away, pulling in a record $34.5 million, noting an average donation of $18.53, bringing his 2019 total to more than $96 million from over 5 million individual donations. Candidates have until January 31st to release their quarter four fundraising totals, but the numbers are starting to trickle out. South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg reported a pretty huge haul of $24.7 million with an average contribution of $33. By the way, after 8 years on the job, Pete Buttigieg carried out his last official act as mayor of South Bend, Indiana on New Year's Day. He had said at the end of 2018 that he wouldn't be seeking a third term in office. Alrighty then. And Andrew Yang's campaign announced they had raised $16.5 million in the last 3 months. And one more casualty to report. Julian Castro, former HUD secretary under President Obama and the only Latino candidate in the field, has officially ended his campaign. Stay tuned. More fundraising numbers and possibly more dropouts will likely be forthcoming. The Australian state of New South Wales declared a week-long state of emergency on Thursday as raging wildfires forced evacuations all along Australia's eastern coast. There was a military-led naval rescue of thousands of tourists and residents who fled to the beach in Victoria. The fires have destroyed at least 350 homes and left at least 8 people dead and 17 missing in New South Wales and Victoria over the last week alone. The state of emergency, which starts Friday morning, empowers authorities to close roads, order mandatory evacuations, and do, quote, anything else we need to do as a state to keep our residents and to keep property safe. Ecologists at the University of Sydney estimated that 480 million mammals, birds, and reptiles have died in the blazes that have swept Australia since September, including a third of the koala population in their main habitat in New South Wales. And finally, with the beginning of 2020 came a bevy of new laws, including the statewide legalization of recreational marijuana in Illinois. And I love this. The state's lieutenant governor was one of the first in line. The day before the law went into effect, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker granted more than 11,000 pardons for low-level marijuana convictions. Elsewhere in the country, 21 states and 26 cities and counties raised their minimum wage. Several more jurisdictions will follow later in the year. Colorado's red flag gun law is now in effect, which allows family and other authorized parties to petition to temporarily remove firearms from someone deemed a danger to themselves or others. Tennessee is moving backwards, with regulations making it easier for residents to get a concealed carry handgun permit. Texting and driving is now officially illegal in Florida. Thank you very much. And plastic bag bans have begun in Oregon and Albuquerque, New Mexico.
I got good
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Look around and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of just below 50, and will be a bit cooler than it was yesterday. Overnight lows should be in the mid-30s. Cloudy skies will prevail. Winds are light and variable and will remain so until tomorrow, when they will come out of the southeast, which they are currently at, and they will pick up to 5 to 10 miles per hour. There is a wind advisory just south along the I-5 from the mothership here in Rogue River, and they should have gale force or greater winds from Weed, Shasta County area, up through Ashland and Medford. So take care if you have a high-profile vehicle. Okay, so it looks like we won't have any rain until Sunday, and it may be a mix of snow and rain. Ragweed pollen is rated at low. The air quality index is in the moderate range at 81 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.23 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 51 and cloudy. Paris is 48 and cloudy. Rome is 57 and sunny. Kyiv is 32 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 30 degrees with light snow. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 40 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 72 and cloudy with a great chance of more fires all along the bush. They're evacuating people, and we'll get into that story right quick. San Francisco, California is 47 and clear. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. This first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. This first amuse-bouche is out of the Associated Press by the ever-present Anonymous Worker Bees. A 20-year-old man is being held in custody pending his next court hearing after being charged with damaging a Picasso painting at the Tate Modern Gallery in London. London police said on Tuesday that Shaquille Ryan Massey of Northwest London has been charged with criminal damage. He appeared at Camberwell Green Magistrates Court on Monday. Police said the attack on the artwork happened on Saturday. Police did not specify the painting, but British media said it was bust of a woman. The Tate Modern said the damaged artwork was being assessed by its conservation team, and the museum remained open. The 1944 painting depicts photographer Dora Maar in a semi-abstract style, wearing a hat and green clothes.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Jill Graylow and Sonali Paul of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tens of thousands of holidaymakers fled seaside towns on Australia's coast as bushfires approached and military ships and helicopters began rescuing. Thousands more trapped by the blazes. Fueled by searing temperatures and high winds, more than 200 fires are burning across the southeastern states of New South Wales and Victoria, threatening several towns. The North South Wales state government declared a state of emergency beginning today, giving authorities the power to forcibly evacuate people and take control of services. It is hell on earth. It is the worst anybody's ever seen, Michelle Roberts said by telephone from a cafe she owns in Malakuta, a southeastern coastal town where 4,000 residents and visitors have been stranded on the beach since Monday. Roberts hoped to get her 18-year-old daughter onto a naval ship, which arrived off the town on Thursday, today, in order to escape the fires and thick smoke engulfing the town. The HMAS Chulis is expected to make 2 or 3 voyages over the coming days. Elsewhere, long queues formed outside supermarkets and petrol stations as residents and tourists sought supplies to either bunker down or escape the fires, emptying shelves of staples like bread and milk. More than 50,000 people were without power, and some towns had no access to drinking water. Everyone is just on edge, said Shane Flanagan, a resident of Bateman's Bay on the North South Wales coast. Authorities urged a mass exodus from several towns on the southeast coast, an area popular with tourists during the summer holiday season, warning that extreme heat forecast for the weekend will further stoke the fires. The priority today is fighting fires and evacuating people to safety, idiot Prime Minister Scott Morrison told reporters in Sydney. I call him an idiot because he is. There are parts of both Victoria and New South Wales which have been completely devastated with the loss of power and communications. 8 people have been killed by wildfires in North South Wales and Victoria since Monday, and 18 are missing. Temperatures are forecast to soar above 104 degrees Fahrenheit along the south coast on Saturday, bringing the prospect of renewed fire fronts to add to around 200 current blazes. It is going to be a very dangerous day. It is going to be a very difficult day, Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons said. Well, let's send our positive energy and prayers and maybe money to the firefighters and I don't know what else. Maybe we could stop pouring carbon into the atmosphere. That might be helpful, indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.